All right, I see recording has started. Thanks, everybody, for your patience. One more time for posterity. Welcome, everybody, to Water Use Advisory Council meeting. My name's Laura Campbell. I serve as one of the tri-chairs for today's meeting, and we've got a screenshot of those who are participating online. We do not have in-person quorum for today, so we are going to ask for additions to the agenda and comments on the minutes, but we're not going to officially approve those until we have quorum. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around the room for those who are here in person so that everybody participating online knows who's here in the room. And I'll jump right over to my left to Brian.
Hi, Brian Burrows, Michigan Trout Unlimited, represent statewide angling.
Katie Lindstrom with Fire Engineering.
Doug Needham with the Michigan Aggregates Association.
Megan Napier with AKT Peerless. Lena Pappas on Groundwater Geologic Services section.
Adam Wygant, Eagle, GRMD.
Austin York, Consumers Energy, filling for regional profit.
James Flint, Eagle.
Power Creation, USGS, Upper Midwest Water Science Center.
Mike Frederick, Michigan Groundwater Association.
Megan Tinsley, Michigan Environmental Council.
Tom Zimnicki, Alliance for the Great Lakes.
Brianne Hammondtree, Jetco. Melissa Grassman, Jetco.
Jamel Eagle, GRMD.
Oh, 9. We do have 9 now. All right, we have quorum.
Nailed it. Good job.
Nailed it. Thanks, Tom. All right, well, in that case, with quorum, and oh, I'm sorry, we went around the table, but we didn't catch the crowd in the back. Let's do our crowd in the back.
Megan Fairwood, Eagle. Hagerman, Eagle. And Mayor, Eagle.
All right, put it outside.
Use your outside voice, folks.
Ross Elmer, Eagle.
Garrett Link, Eagle.
Lillian Butterball, IMC.
Andy LeBaron, Eagle.
All right, thank you very much. Okay. Let's go ahead, and since we do have quorum here today, now that we've got everyone present, let's do approval of minutes from our December 10th meeting. Hopefully you guys received the draft of that when you got the email notice or checked the website in anticipation of today's meeting. Any comments, edits, changes that need to be made to those minutes?
I have one that was sent via email from Tom Frazier, just stating a modification to the last page of the open comments. He just specified to kind of edit the text to say Tom Frazier noted this was his last meeting and he had previously notified the tri-chairs. He noted they are looking to get a person to replace his position.
Yep, and Pat is not able to join us today. Pat is coordinating with Townships Association, right? To
I've lost track, but I believe that those appointments may have been taken care of in the last couple of weeks. James, did you get notice of it?
yeah, Pat was gonna check into a replacement for Tom because Townships Association had submitted a nominee to replace him and to be officially appointed, but I had not heard an update from Pat on whether or not he was able to get confirmation of that.
Does anybody else have any information?
Wasn't that Dick?
That's the local government seat, right?
Yeah.
I think that was
I thought-
made
Yeah,
along with Tom.
Tom's was made recently under that same need for
Yeah,
house.
yeah. I thought it was Dick Norton out of U of M.
okay,
And he wasn't able to attend this meeting,
okay.
but
I had not seen that notification come through, but if it's done, I am glad to know that. So
I got,
yeah.
it appears as though they might have been taken care of.
Okay, okay. In that case, Bree, do you have contact information for Dick Norton to make sure he's on the mailing list and
I believe
he's
so.
gonna get all the updates for,
Yeah, me and Trisha were going over it this morning, so
okay,
we should have it.
perfect.
Got the letter in front of me.
You did get the letter. Okay. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for the update on that. Okay, so with that note on updating the minutes, any other edits to the minutes or any changes that are needed before they're finalized for approval?
I didn't get any by email, so.
All right. With that, since we tend to run as much as possible by consensus, we don't do roll call votes for approval of these things. So I'm going to ask if there's any objection to approving the minutes from December. And hearing none, we'll go ahead and approve those minutes as amended for posting to the website. Next, we're going to handle approval of the agenda for today. Anything that anyone needs to add to today's agenda? Hearing none. Okay. I will now ask if there's any objections or concerns with approving today's agenda. All right. Hearing none, we'll go ahead and approve today's agenda. Next item on our listed agenda is public comment. For those who aren't familiar with our process, we hold 2 public comment periods. The first, we like to focus on agenda items if at all possible. The second one, which will be held at the end of the meeting, is open for pretty much any kind of water or relevant updates or information that folks want to share. So at this time, I'll ask if there's any public comment on agenda items. All right. Hearing and seeing none, we'll keep rolling right on through. Brian, since Pat's not here, do you want me to cover the next section and then give it to you to take over? Okay. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and start in with committee chair reports. I did get a request from Emily Finnell for the Conservation and Efficiency Committee to go first because she's got some conflicts with her schedule later on this afternoon. So, Emily, I am going to go ahead and turn it over to you and let you make your report and get out of here and get on with your day.
All right, thanks, Laura. And I think Kelly is also on participating virtually, so she can fill in any gaps that I miss. If you want to go ahead and pull up the slide. All right. So we continued to meet as a committee as we were last year, meeting monthly. So we had a meeting in January and February. We've been working on our annual committee work plan to guide our work. So we've reviewed those activities and provided some updates. Those include things like implementing the 2020 recommendations, starting some next steps to move forward on the 2022 recommendation, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a few minutes. And then continuing with our speaker series to help broaden some of the knowledge base within the committee members, and further collaboration with some of our other internal partners that are focused on some adjacencies to water conservation through energy efficiency and sustainability in our water infrastructure investments. So we're happy to share the full work plan with anyone who's interested in taking a look at that. We're still incorporating revisions from our February committee meeting that was held last week. We also had an update presentation from Alliance for Water Efficiency on the project that they are implementing. This is one of the 2020 recommendations looking at innovations in water conservation, best management practices, and really all of our sectors, but with a specific focus around business and industry. We do have a recording of that presentation that was given at our committee meeting last week. So if anyone is interested in seeing that, we can work on trying to figure out how to share that, but it is a little bit complicated for those outside of that meeting participant list. And that was really insightful. They're not finished with the project. They will be completing their work in August of this year, but they've completed a lot of the stakeholder interviews with Michigan's water sectors, their literature review, and just had some initial findings on opportunities for enhancements and best management practices and just what they're seeing in terms of motivations for water conservation across our water sectors. Nothing too surprising at this point. Definitely a lot of opportunity for education. I think it was interesting, but maybe not surprising that some of the water sectors were not familiar with the 2008 voluntary best management practices that were developed, but that could be from, turnover in staff, or just that their own industry or business has its own water conservation practices that they work with day to day. And they don't necessarily look at that 08 list. But there overall was a lot of general implementation of water conservation practices, primarily driven by, environmental sustainability goals and for cost saving purposes. So we're looking forward to seeing the final report on that work completing later on this year. I'm happy to share those results with the full WUAC and then, potentially bring them to this group for a full presentation if there's interested. We're going to be moving to a bi-monthly schedule. So our next committee meeting will be April 3rd. And that will, I think, work better with some of our workflow because we've got a lot of projects underway. So I'll give a couple updates on our other projects. As I mentioned, we're about halfway through our water conservation best management practice project that OGL is administering. Appreciate all the support from the council members to help encourage stakeholder participation. We also are moving forward and making great progress now that we have the 2 full-time ag irrigation specialists hired. With MSU Extension for the water conservation efficiency practices. Those educators are presenting at a lot of the winter meetings. They're also working on connecting with growers and equipment suppliers. And if you recall, the purpose of this was to develop a broader strategy for enhancing water conservation efficiency in ag and adding animal industries to the water conservation practices. So we're going to be inviting those educators to come in the fall and just do a debrief with the committee on what they were finding so far. There's also an stakeholder advisory group that is helping to advise those ag irrigation specialists in that strategy and the implementation of their work. The 2022 recommendation that we received funding in the current Eagle budget appropriation, this is to fund another pilot program to do demonstrations of irrigation retrofits to help demonstrate the water and energy efficiency savings on fields, and then show the kind of benefits from those retrofits and the implementation efforts, with the idea of helping to tell that story of those water and energy savings to increase water conservation efficiency practices. This is another $600,000. So it's been a little tricky for us to track because we've got 2 grants now at $600,000. So I think our next recommendation will be for a different dollar amount. We decided yesterday after meeting internally that Office of the Great Lakes will administer that grant. And so we'll be meeting in the next couple of months with MSU Extension to start moving forward on next steps to get that grant in place. Next slide. Just an update on something that we had been talking about in our report outs last fall. The committee had been looking at funding and working with some research institutions on a climate migration and sort of water demand, water forecasting research project concept. It's been really interesting in the conversations that we've been having as we did get that concept finished. There's been a growing interest regionally in this topic and with some other groups. So we've been talking with some regional partners, some of the other states and some other nonprofit organizations about their interests. And it's looking like there may be a regional project moving forward. Don't have all the details on that at this point. So we want to wait and make sure we're not duplicating efforts to see how those regional conversations proceed. But this project would be looking at, existing data on static groundwater levels, current trends in water sectors and their water use, other trend information that exists, kind of building off of a lot of existing studies like the Joyce Foundation's groundwater study that was done a couple of years ago. So not trying to reinvent the wheel, but looking at all these existing data sets and how can they be integrated in a way that we can do some scenario planning and forecasting to see what the future might look like in Michigan in particular, given changing climate. I think that's it. Kelly, did I miss anything? What else would you like to add?
You always do a fabulous job. Thank you for that. I think the only thing for this group to consider additionally is when the Alliance for Water project gets done, that we consider having them do a presentation to the whole Water Use Advisory Council. I think some of the recommendations are really enlightening, especially as you look at, policy and what drives people and organizations to take action on different things. I think there are some pretty interesting considerations in there that everyone might want to hear.
Thanks, Kelly.
All right. Any
And then Laura-
questions?
I'm
Yep, go
happy to
ahead.
take any questions, and then I would just offer maybe another slight modification. I'm happy to give my update on the Water User Committee project and just pull that out of Jim Milne's slides from later. I can give a quick update on that too.
Jim, you good with that?
Yep.
All right. Let's do it.
Sorry, somehow I got left off the Water Use Advisory Council meeting notices, so I have an appointment later this afternoon, but they're on my calendar now, so appreciate everybody's flexibility today.
Okay. Integrated assessment case study slide.
Looks like it's up. Thanks. So I just want to give an update on the MSU integrated assessment project that was developing water user committee guidebooks and hoping to conduct some case studies. We have received the draft guidebooks from the MSU research team. They've been reviewed by our interagency. We kind of called them our project leadership team. So this was Abby Eaton, Jay Wesley from DNR, and then Jim and Andy from the water use program, and then James Clift and I. So we've taken a look at the current kind of working drafts as they've submitted them to us. And we are in the process of using those initial drafts to develop a working document that the department can use to seek additional input from water users. And then also to add some additional information that we thought was important just about how the water use program actually works for an educational opportunity, and to include that in the guidebooks. And then there's some other pieces that we're looking at that we think might need to be added. These draft documents will be reviewed by the agencies within the next month or so for further feedback and as an initial next step internally for us. Then we are expecting a draft of the final report from the MSU team. They have submitted their draft final report for their stakeholder advisory board to review. So that's under review right now. They expect to be incorporating feedback from the stakeholder advisory board later this month and submitting to the office by February 21st. I think that's a Friday, their final draft report. Our process requires that we would review that final draft report and provide further comments. So we'll be circulating that draft report back to the interagency team that's been supporting the MSU team for further comments and any edits. We'll get those back to the MSU team so they can address those as they prepare their final report. And then once we get that final report, we'll be able to share that with the Water Use Advisory Council. I'm thinking that'll be kind of late spring. We're also, hoping to have some further internal discussions, lots of lessons learned from this project. So we want to be able to kind of talk about those internally, think about some things that the department needs to address to help support water user committees, and then have some further discussion with the Water Use Advisory Council about kind of how we want to move forward on this project. So we're at kind of the early stages working on this draft guidebook and looking forward to that final draft report from the project team so we can kind of gather all that information and help inform our thinking as we move forward.
All right. Thanks, Emily. And thank you, Kelly. Also, any questions for Emily or Kelly? Emily, I had a question. I know that you had talked about how you thought there were some regional projects regarding climate migration and water use. And I wanted to know if you knew any specifics or any of the groups who are involved with those existing studies, or if that's something that you guys are still looking into.
I think these are pretty early discussions, so I don't want to get out ahead of the groups that are looking at this. I think their focus is less on climate migration though, and more on, you know, what does future water demand look like in the Great Lakes region? So also thinking about just, you know, current federal administration and language and how we frame this is going to be important for bringing groups together. So I'm hoping that within a month or so, we have more details on some official next steps of how that project's going to move forward, because we'd really like to, you know, spend some funding through our office too, and make sure that the project, if it can meet the needs that we were envisioning in Michigan, that would be great. And we're happy to see somebody else fund a project that we don't have to administer. But if there's some other questions that we're still interested in trying to answer, then, you know, we would want to continue some conversations around what that kind of a project could look like. So it's a little bit gray at this point until those groups have those conversations.
I mean, I'll throw something out.
Go for it.
Just, I don't know necessarily about the report or the project that Emily's talking about, where that's gonna land, but we're doing some of that work right now at the Alliance and thinking about kind of what does long-term use trends look like for the region, and thinking through like as from a state policy perspective and kind of that overlap with federal policy around large water users, kind of moving residents from Arizona moving to Michigan, and more the industries moving up this way, and kind of what that looks like. And so we're doing some of that work. I mean, I've chatted with Emily a couple times just about kind of what that project is looking like for us. And so we're gonna have something end of like early summer. I would think we'll have a small-ish report on that, and then looking to kind of go from there.
All right. Thanks, Tom. Yeah, Adam.
Just kind of piquing my interest, because a lot of the conversations we're having are sort of parallel to that, the water use projections, but also being able to, a lot of the work that comes from the funding recommended by this group is understanding the water availability piece that comes along. So we're heavily focused on doing science in the next 4 to 5 years that presumably will track and answer some of those difficult questions that like your work may point to, you know, what parts of the state or areas, you know, is there a cliff we're running off in a specific area, areas that are going to receive additional pressure, inform policy changes, all those things. So I know we've got folks that are active on this committee from Jim's group and Lena's group, but the thought just occurs to me that, yeah, we want to link those up the best we can, because these questions are starting to come in.
All right, thanks. Any other questions or comments?
So people from Arizona aren't coming? I was in Arizona last week. I really liked it.
Yeah, it's nice. I feel like they'll stop somewhere in between. Okay. Arizona.
I feel like everybody's kind of afraid to say data centers.
Oh, no, I would love to talk about data centers, but we can add that to the next agenda.
All right. Okay, moving on then. We'll put a pin in data centers for a future meeting.
Well, it's on this meeting, it's just.
It is. All right, data collection committee.
For data collection committee, we are needing to find a date and time to have a meeting. We have a pretty good collection now of the topics that we need to fill up probably 2 agendas likely with. Jim was really good this past week and helping to identify a bunch of the different projects that are in various stages of implementation. So we need to kind of get on top of those, have discussions about that, figure out level of engagement and support from the committee on different ones. So you'll see something from myself or Megan pretty soon with some form of a scheduler. Honestly, I worked a couple months ago just pretty hard to get a good list of people that wanted to participate in the data committee, so we didn't keep leaving people out or have like a large collection of names that never attended. And even going through that exercise, I think I still have 2 or 3 emails, miscellaneous that have come in that I need to update the mailing list and get it right before we schedule that. So that's just kind of operationally, that's kind of where the committee's at. We'll have to start scheduling a couple meetings and then use those to determine how frequent we need to kind of keep going with them. The one issue that I was going to use our committee right now to seek a little input is just about the Inland Lakes Adverse Resource Impact Project. That was a recommendation from 2022 that was funded last year. And we're working with Eagle to begin figuring out the scope of work, RFPs, and do the implementation work. And the questions arisen of whether that should stay as a project that the data committee tracks, or whether we should have some form of like a standalone group on that. We can just have sort of a inside the data committee, we can have the whole data committee stay very involved with it, work on it through that. We can have it as a work group, but we do recognize that that project involves very equal dose of sort of at least conceptual modeling with data as well. There's not more one of them than the other required. And so it'll be one of these ones that there's probably, I'm guessing 2/3 of the model committees and 2/3 of the data committee that are interested in participating in. Once we dig in, we'll probably also have to reach out and invite subject matter experts to engage with us and give us their time helping to brainstorm solutions along the way. So it'll probably take a life to figure out what the right mode for the Water Council is to have that, and then also invite some external parties into helping us solve that problem. So this is a couple of things. I'm inviting input on what feels right for process for the Water Council. Number 2, inviting anybody to raise their hands and say, I really want to be involved in that. So I can start forming that list. And then I can also provide some more details if it's helpful of, what's kind of envisioned as what that project really is. I know everybody participated in developing it, but it's been a while since we really dug it. So if that's of interest, I can spend some more time talking about it, but input on what feels right for where to embed this.
It looks like there's a question from David Bush.
Sure. Please,
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, hi. I was raising my hand to make sure that I am involved with that project, and I do think it should be a work group. I think those smaller groups work better, both for scheduling and for technical reasons. But either way, I wish to be involved. Thanks.
Thank you.
Just a background. It was funded in 22.
It was a recommendation in our 22 report that just received appropriations in last year.
Okay.
For additional context, the 2014 version of the council, there was an Inland Lake committee.
Right.
And one of the recommendations coming out of that led to MSU was doing an Inland Lake bathymetry mapping project.
Yeah, in the past, that's kind of why I asked for some opinions on process or governance. Is we've had it where it was its own committee. It wasn't modeled, wasn't data. It was its own standalone. We've also kind of handled, minor progress along the way within the data committee. We're comfortable having joint models, data committee meetings when it's appropriate. But kind of it's whatever everybody's leisure and feels right. Seeing no strong preferences. So that's okay too. That tells me that we have
Might be the data center.
I think the work group
Okay.
makes sense.
All right.
Kelly's got her hand up. Yeah.
Please go ahead, Kelly.
Go ahead, Kelly.
Hey, Brian, just for like organization. So if this was a subset of the current committee that you're chairing, then it would be made up of folks from that current committee, like a smaller group of them. But if you're thinking of like, hey, let's anyone that has the technical expertise and the thoughts and interest in this be part of this group, then I think it should be its standalone committee and not report like up to a different committee. It just provides kind of a better organizational flow, I would say. So if we're looking at the folks who would serve on this kind of newly formed group to work on this, specialized thoughts and ideas and tech, and it needs to be technical, then maybe that needs to be a standalone committee. But if it is going to be a subset of a current committee, then it should be made up of people from that committee that it is a subset of. Gosh, hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, we will need to engage outside expertise. No way about it. But and I guess I'll, by way of background, right? We've approached this subject numerous times in the past. Each time the obstacles or impediments were very clear, the solutions weren't. This is an attempt not to bring back to this council, hey, we've solved it and here's the tool that we'd like you to use. It's not that. It is thinking through modeling, being maybe freed of what data we currently have and saying, what are the pathways that we would like to tie a withdrawal to two different types of effects on a lake. And it will go back and forth and be iterative, because as soon as you do that, you might say, well, geez, we would need that data and we don't have that data today. In some regard, there's been more and more progress made in that field. There's more tools available. So it can be going back and saying what data is available now that might make the connections and the pathways from the modeling side more possible than before. I think the product that we built the recommendation around, certainly the product that we budgeted around, was not a finished tool. It was, can we identify a possible, feasible, reasonable pathway to work on to develop a tool? How would a tool work? It won't be to create the tool. So in that sense, I'm comfortable with whatever everybody's comfortable with. We will want to recruit, topic area specialists that have not been engaged with us before. But at the end of the product, it would be coming back to the Water Council, whether it's a standalone committee or through data committee or whatever, to present what we've come up with and then have a discussion. At that point, if nothing else, do we need to create an Inland Lakes ARI committee standing going forth to take the product of that and do something with it, do the next steps? So it wouldn't result in I don't see the product resulting in really clear sort of recommendations that the council makes, but providing the basis that we can discuss what our next steps would be.
Is that what the appropriation was for? Was to kind of envision what those pathways?
It was about $200,000, and it was really that financial estimate was really to get sort of facilitatory, a facilitating team that had more than just meeting facilitation, but had technical abilities to both sort of do facilitated modeling, brainstorming, and then if we say, hey, what about this data set? Does that get us there? Does it not get us there? To be able to do background research. It wasn't to, at $200,000, it was not to build such a company. Any other comments on mine?
Not seeing any at this point. Let's see, we have something in the chat. Hang on. Dave, your comment on an Inland Lake ARI committee. Are you saying you're interested in serving on one once it reaches the point of coming out of the data committee? Is that what I'm reading from your comment?
Either way. Oh, Dave Maturin, never mind.
Yeah, sorry, Dave Maturin.
It's okay. I have adjourned now. This.
Okay.
I'll volunteer.
Okay, well, yeah, Dave, you're voluntold on this committee, whether that was what you intended or not. According to Brian. Okay. Any other questions, comments, thoughts about the data committee? Brian, are you at a point where you're, aside from asking for folks interested in it, are you ready to try to make some kind of decision about formal structure of this either work group or committee, or do you want to think about it a little bit?
I think I got some good input, some good stuff, and I think we'll start in with having the data committee manage it. We'll have some meetings with Eagle staff about it, and when we have our data committee meeting, we'll talk about it in the committee a little bit more and come up with a final good game.
Okay. So folks who are interested in following up on this more, make sure you get yourselves on the mailing list as somebody who's interested in the data committee, because the conversation is going to start there, and then we'll figure out where to go from that point, whether it becomes a work group or its own standalone committee, and kind of what the expectations are from that group. Okay. Moving on then, if there aren't any additional questions, do we have anybody here who can talk from the models committee?
Yep. Dave's not able to be here, so he did ask me to give an update. We have 3 projects that are underway that we don't really have much of an update for this meeting. Dave did indicate that we will have more of an update on those at the April Water Use Advisory Council meeting. So that would be on the Michigan Hydrologic Framework, the Michigan Integrated Water Management Database, and compiling the key aquifer properties. One more project that is underway from the 2020 recommendations is the 3D glacial aquifer mapping project. So I do have a bit more of an update on that one. Just a brief reminder, so that project is happening in 3 different phases. The first phase is collecting and compiling the data that will be used in the mapping exercise. The second phase is completing the transition probability mapping. And then the third phase is more of a summarizing and evaluating the results from that transition probability mapping. So the collection and cleaning of the data, that work has been completed. The transition probability modeling is currently underway, on track to complete, essentially the bulk of that work this month. And then that'll be followed up by a written report on both the process and the results of that. From there, we'll move on to phase 3, which is the summarizing the results and evaluating the goodness of fit. So that will happen after phase 2, targeted for completion in June of this year. I didn't mention, but so VAR is completing this work under contract with Eagle. We do have included in our scope and update meeting. So I anticipate the timing will work out, that could happen in the June Water Use Advisory Council meeting, where we can, dive into more of the details of what's gone into that work. That's the update on the 3D glacial mapping, but happy to take any questions.
All right.
I just wanted to verify, you were saying that the second phase would be occurring in June, or was that the third phase?
That'll be the third phase completed by June.
All right. Questions for the modeling group? Great, seeing none. Implementation committee.
Yeah, I don't think we have anything to report. We're gonna have to get together soon to try to start tracking where we're at along the process with some of these recommendations. So say we're issued the report. Now it's back to the drawing board. So.
All right. And we've got new topics still on the list, but I could have sworn that we actually went ahead and as a council said we were gonna suspend the new topics committee. Am I remembering that wrong?
Yeah, I think when we were talking about it, it's because of these new recommendations coming out. We weren't sure if we were gonna need any topics.
Okay.
That's how we came about that being on the list again.
Okay, so we don't have an official committee. We're just having a placeholder.
Yeah.
In case somebody says, nobody else can deal with this, we need a group of people to do this.
Yeah.
Okay. So possibly to become the Inland Lakes
It'll be renamed potentially.
All right. All right, thanks. Well, at this time, unless there's any other questions about the committees or about any of the work that's been ongoing, pausing for effect, I'm gonna go ahead and turn the agenda over to Brian and we'll jump into the legislative report. With
Okay.
my sincere thanks again for everybody's help in getting that report out, putting all the content in it, making it look awesome, and getting it out to our legislators. So huge team effort. Thank you guys very much.
Yeah, and this is meant to just kind of be a sharing of ideas, exchanging of information, if anybody has it. We have no kind of drafted outreach plan or presentation to click through. We did get it out, at the end of, almost the end of December to the last group of legislators that were required recipients. And then, thank you to Laura, she kind of bumped me today, and this morning we got it out to all of the appropriate new seats, especially in the appropriations side of things. So we've satisfied our minimum obligations and then a little bit further into making sure that the current players have the information, have access to it, and are aware of it. I think what's important is just for us to reflect on our success rate of assuming that that minimal amount of delivery of our report is effective at getting awareness of it. And that the simple version, right, is our 2020 recommendations took well into 2022 before they got attention to appropriations. Our 2022 took till 2024 to kind of raise up, and that was, the last round was thanks to some very special efforts at the end. I'm not sure how many times I've seen something not make the governor's House or Senate budgets at all and then be approved by all in conference at the sort of the 11th hour. So that was a special effort. So seeing today that we have sent this out both last year and this year, that's probably not also going to be sufficient to raise its level of importance or awareness to get it to consideration and budget consideration. So we probably all need to do more to make sure that we are doing as much as appropriate to be effective in it. And we, in our emails, we've certainly suggested that if they have any questions or wish for, water council representatives to come in and talk at committees and give testimony, that we would be glad to do that. However, we probably need to formulate plans to continuously ask and to watch for those types of meetings. I know Eagle often is sort of required to go in and give detailed presentations. So our, one soft request would be if you're getting pulled in because they demand you to be there, present that. If you have the opportunity to just say, hey, would you like some water council appointees to talk about their unique recommendations? We would appreciate you doing that. We will do some bumping as well, so it doesn't get overlooked and we do an appropriate level of outreach on it. So we have no baked plan, but it's important to say out loud that doing the minimum doesn't work that well. So I think it's upon all of us to do a bit more.
Brian, can I just add in really quick, just a few, updates and details in terms of the budget process. So our staff did take a quick look at the governor's budget that got introduced last week. We did not see any indication of funding for Water Use Advisory Council recommendations, but Sarah Pearson, since you're on, I wanted to know if you saw anything regarding funding for Michigan Geological Survey, because I know that tends to come in as a separate budget item.
Hey there, good afternoon. Yeah, I did. It's in there.
Okay, good. So I'd like to know that at least some of our ask is incorporated, so that, because that makes the rest of our lift smaller.
You ask her what it is. Is it the base funding or a new item?
It's 6 million.
Base funding.
3 million, I'm sorry.
3 million.
Yeah, just the base funding.
Yeah, okay.
So in a similar vein, not to put anybody on the spot, but we had we'd also put the placekeeper for the importance of ongoing financial needs on some of the Eagle initiatives. Do you have a summary of how you feel those were incorporated or not into the executive proposed budget?
I don't have a sense that they're actually part of this proposal for change or executive budget. It's something that we would probably want to look at, like for next year in development of 2027 budget is, and we should maybe have a better idea of that through conversations this year. Still supported by your 2024 recommendations, but maybe that's part of our FY 2027 proposal for change or budget ask. That would run alongside of that, then that way it, I guess, coincides with this group's advocacy and what we're saying also internally. I think that conversation was a little late in the fall where we were getting our thoughts together on that. And certainly appreciate that thought. I definitely believe that we're doing a lot of good work, and for it to, develop to full value, you have to maintain those data collection systems, and that's gonna have a price tag associated with it.
Mhm. Absolutely. Do we, at the time that we published the report, we kind of left off the remaining agreement that was yet to be signed between USGS and Eagle, because we didn't have the amounts for it yet. We just said it was going to be forthcoming. Is that agreement signed, or are we still waiting on that?
I think we said one that it's signed.
Okay. Okay, good. Maybe that's something then that we can chat about in terms of, as Eagle's coming up with figuring out what comes forward as ongoing expenses that Eagle requests internally for its budget versus new money that's requested by the council and its recommendations, and how that should look, not only for our discussions this spring, but also for, future budget talks and reports as well. Dave Maturin, I know this is something that you've been very, very engaged in and very helpful on. So thank you very much for helping with the contacts that you have downtown and pushing for Water Use Advisory Council recommendations. My thought is that we definitely want to try to get into some hearings and the relevant committees. So Ag and Natural Resources and Environment on the Senate and House side, to potentially either do some presentations or, get a chance to speak at some budget hearings with some of the appropriations committees. What are your thoughts about an effective way that council members can really help to push for that? I know you said you were having trouble earlier with your system. If you're not able to unmute, maybe put something in the chat to let me know. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. He can't get on the microphone. Okay.
Can you remind, in the past, do we go in and speak kind of as a collective kind of recommendation on all of the asks? Do we narrow things down? I know that there are a number of things in there. I mean, is it kind of like a general overview when we go in there, or are we really getting into kind of some specific, like, these are the top priority ones?
It's different a few times.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's been different a few times. When I first began participating in this, it was quite formal. All the committees would have all three co-chairs from the Water Council come forward and speak about the conclusions, all that type of stuff. I think Laura was the one on the hot seat and able to do kind of a last minute request the last time we got in front of a committee. And then the last couple of rounds, honestly, we put out the request a few times that be more than glad to come and present a summary of what we're recommending, answer questions, and have not been asked to do that. So it's been a little while. I will say that during the COVID period of time, we went, that was when we were doing the 2020 report, and we went from sort of being told, hey, we're looking like we're gonna have a $4 billion shortfall in the state budget. We did the report, pretty humble and modest amount of, highly prioritized items. And then the three co-chairs were asked to come in for a couple Senate meetings, not formal meetings, just meetings with key people. And they were starting to ask, hey, it does look like we have a lot. How do we, what are your thoughts about it? And in that meeting, I'll tell you, the three of us presented what we could say representing the consensus recommendations of the Water Council. So there was a lot of ideas floated, and we kind of stuck with saying, these are the recommendations that everybody had consensus support for. And, I don't think there was a whole lot of it, but, I personally wasn't comfortable if somebody said, yeah, but, there's 8 of them in there. Which one do you really like? We sort of stuck with, these are the consensus.
Yeah.
They're not prioritized amongst each other. These are priorities. Whether that was
It's gonna be
effective.
simple.
Yeah, this one, other than ongoing, there is one.
Yeah.
Sort of one novel, key, discrete recommendation. So it makes it much simpler. So.
Yeah. And I want to capture this for the meeting because this is important. Dave's been mentioning, we need to make sure and work with Eagle, to help us with the request for kind of balancing that new and ongoing money, as well as we need to get key committee folks for appearance, at those relevant approach and natural resource, environment, ag committees. And, in the House, we've got some, Farm Bureau has some connections with those folks. Some of those are farmers and our members. So so we can definitely reach out on that end. We could probably use some help with reaching out to some of the Senate committees and Senate approach folks to be able to get on the agenda. But I'd really like to do that because I think this is a nice, simple, straightforward request. It's not a lot of money. To me, it's one of those that's very easy to say yes to.
Yeah, and I think all of this effort to me is worth it because we've had our recommendations heard and supported, but the time delays mean that, some of the ones that we drafted in 2020 are just under beginning implementation now, 5 calendar years later. So all the things that we would like fixed or improved, it's pretty easy to start living for a very long time without progress on those, just by letting them slip a little bit at a time.
Two things there. One thing, some of the lag, I talked about proposals for change and how we had this conversation later in the year. The department's having their proposal for change conversations around June. So like for FY 26, we were having those conversations with, I would say, my recollection's right, those were due to like our executive office early summer, and they've been being vetted. Like, we didn't even know till around early December which of our proposals for change were like moving from the department to the governor's office. Sometimes depending on funding, anticipated funding, there's limits, like department shall not forward more than 4. And so when you think about all the needs in a department, even if but at least now, like, we would be able to highlight that for 2026 as hey, the Water Use Committee has identified this as a need, we agree, and we put that out there. And then maybe, if it makes those kind of cuts, then you hope to see it in the governor's recommendation, but there's a lag there. And then also, we're keenly aware of some of the lag in getting some of these, the 2020 recommendations, and then the time that the money came in, and then the time that you see activity. All I can say is we're keenly aware of that. We've launched, Howard's well aware, we've launched a lot of work, haven't we, this fall? And so we're like super, super busy, but we also share the fear that if like general fund sits around not being used for very long, and it's continued as work project year over year, then people will be like, huh, they don't really need that. And so we don't want to fall into a situation where that money is in jeopardy. And to the extent that you all make recommendations for projects that can be done in a year, even though the approach is good for appropriation year plus 4, it's not a good, you know what I mean? Some projects will be long-term projects, and those that are short, we want to pop them out.
Appreciate that. Anybody else have anything that they'd like to add?
I guess just to follow up, Adam, on your comments, how can we be helpful? Or is there something that the council can do to assist with Eagle and the budget talks? Because, I mean, to me, it is criminal to not include a budget appropriation to continue to collect data from infrastructure you've already put out in the countryside. I mean, that's just a waste. And I would be angrily writing my legislator about wasting my tax dollars for having gauges and monitoring wells out there that aren't having data collected because we don't have the money to do it. So how can we help?
Well, I think the makeup of this committee, I mean, you all have a lot of conversations outside of this group in your various industries or interest groups that you represent. And so to the extent that we identify the importance of that, I mean, USGS is a huge important partnership to us with the National Groundwater Monitoring Network, but I try to think of sort of states, like their funding can fluctuate greatly too. So, as we start up the monitoring network again, I strongly thinking of things in terms of taking care of our state. We do that through other state and federal partners, USGS and MGS. But I think all these conversations build that, these things are working together to where we want to be for sustainability in Michigan, both for the industries and sourcing our water that we need. So hopefully that answers my question, but that's why all these are important. And if we all believe that, we're all singing from that sheet of music, I guess that's one of the major things that we could do. Just, you guys know, like legislature, if they start hearing conflicting things, then that sends mixed messages, and at a minimum, they'd be like, well, I don't really want to touch that,
Very fair.
Any hands up online?
I am not seeing any.
Anybody else? Anything to throw in? All right, good discussion for now. Thank you. Switching topics. Brad, would you like to introduce the next one? I believe it's Sarah Pearson to give a update on the WellLogic triage. Sure, right?
Yep. The WellLogic triage project, we wanted to give you an update, and really Sarah and John Yelich and the MGS team has really carried the mail on this. Our division has managed this grant, $1.9 million grant, I believe, we've been working at this for about 5 years, but I think Sarah's team has done the substantial correction work in this data set. I've personally been a little surprised as the data is bearing out some of the issues that were all suspected in the WellLogic data set. And so we're coming up on completion, and I think our reliance and trust of the WellLogic data set, I can't say enough about the impact that's going to have on our reliance on that data. So Sarah Pearson, Director of the MGS.
All right, thank you. And good afternoon again. Yes, we are in the home stretch with the WellLogic data, which is really phenomenal, as you just heard. And Adam pointed out that there's 1.2 million well logs that we're aware of. And that's a monumental task to touch each one. And about 700,000 of those were scanned well records that predate the databases and required manual entry. And then the remaining were in WellLogic, but because of technology changes over time and migrations to date from different databases, GPS wasn't a thing a long time ago. A lot of the data was, just migrated easily and put, within the centroid of the section. So you have a lot of wells in one location. So at this point, we are well over 90% completed, over 1.1 million well records. And we are on track to be done by the end of this year, which is when the contract ends. So we are completing some of the, I guess, more challenging counties. We did all of the priority counties that Eagle laid out first. There were 46 priority counties, and now we're following through and just wrapping up the last of those, of the rest of the counties, because we completed the 46 counties that were priority. And we are also, we've developed some tools that help us go in and sweep the data and with a script and determine if the location looks good with just a general look using the technology first. And then we go in and make those corrections. So it has sped up the process, and it's really beneficial because now we can go back and sweep some of those counties that were first up and that we completed first off without that technology. And we'll go through and do some touch-ups before the end of the year, as well as getting all of them in.
Sarah, can I ask what or how much work is your team doing in terms of your ability to determine if there's incorrect information or if the well log is showing it, either in a location or or some of the other data that was entered about it that was incorrect, or stuff that's showing up as like a inconsistency in the well record? What are you guys doing about those?
It depends on what that inconsistency is. If it's location, that is what our primary task is, to be able to locate them using the existing information that we have. Have we corrected all 1.1 million? No, there are some where there is just really insufficient information. The way we used to geolocate things back in, in the 70s and the 80s isn't the way we do that now. And so, you'd say you go down the dirt road and turn left at the barn and it's next to the tree. That's not going to do us much good. So there is a whole suite of problem logs that we've identified, and then we pass those back over to Eagle, and Eagle has the drinking water, source water unit, has a couple of staff who are looking at those more challenging well locations and trying to sleuth those by looking into records and reaching out to health departments and drillers as necessary. As far as any discrepancies in the well construction information, that we do point out if, let's say the casing number is deeper than the screen depth or something weird like that. We make some notations on some things like that. And then we also, if we have the paper record, and some of the paper records that we have were also input into WellLogic. So there's a double. The scanned record is also available data-wise in WellLogic. So we do a comparison there. And if we see some discrepancies, we go off of the paper log and make that update if as needed. But we're not changing lithologies or anything like that. We might be using more consistent terminology in the lithologies, but that's about all.
Sarah, I know you don't have the slides up that you shared with us with updates, but as I recall, I was just looking for them. I mean, I've watched these maps turn green with your progress over the years, and this last month, you hear that it's coming to an end, but then when you only see like 3 counties left, like holy cow, they did it and we're doing it. But the thing that really resonated with me is they had the error statistics and it was in the 66%, wasn't it? That like 66 or more percentage of the records that you all touched had some sort of error in them.
Yeah, it was north of that. It's, just looking for my numbers here. See, Todd, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, first of all, I would say, you know, we work in Indiana and Ohio as well, and the well log data set in Michigan is, I can't even tell you, exponentially better than the other states. It's actually a joy to work with. So thanks for all the work you guys have been doing on that. And as a follow-up, I know you're just wrapping this one up, so I'm already looking forward to the next part of it. But is there anything in the works or any program that you're aware of or you'd like to implement to start verifying some of the lithologies? You know, we frequently have wells that are right next to each other that have very different lithology. And you know, with the geophysical equipment that's available, and is there any type of a program that you're aware of, or would you be interested in pushing towards something along that line to start verifying the lithology information, not just the location information?
That is something that I really would love to see. And that was something that I was working on when I was at Eagle, and we were working on the Equus system. And because the Equus system is supposed to be all borings, including remediation wells and MDOT geotechnical borings and others where we do have geologists making the determinations. Not that the water well drillers aren't well versed in the work that they do, but we've got trained geologists also who are out there conducting borings all over the state. And, you know, that's one thing I would love to be able to do, is get that data in there. And that's going to, you know, require a backfile conversion of existing water well or monitoring well logs, recovery well logs, and geotechnical boring logs, and getting all of that in there. That's one way to do it. We're also doing some borings to bedrock in the counties that we're working in. Not that it's, you know, widespread, but we're doing 10 or so in the counties so that we can do some verification of the lithology, and we can get deeper too, because, you know, with water wells, you get down to the water that's, you know, economically, you know, good. It's enough water, and we don't need to drill any farther. So, you know, you don't want to charge the customer extra, right? So we're doing that in the counties where we're mapping. So we've done that in Ottawa, Allegan. We're doing it in Muskegon, Kent County this year, and Montcalm County. So we're chipping away at that. But I think that we do that and we couple it with a lot of those other wells and borings that were done through other programs, we can get some good data. Now, would I like to be more robust than that? Absolutely.
We all would. I guess what I'm specifically asking in addition to that is, you know, with gamma logs, even, we can do
Yes,
that
we're
through
logging.
existing casings. And I'm wondering if there's a program or any interest or any rumblings of how do we encourage that on maybe wells that are being repaired, or old existing ones that we can actually get a geophysical log to help delineate some of those lithologies.
I don't know of anything like that. We are gamma logging ours, and I would be delighted to do something like that. I'm also going to be interviewing for hydrogeologists. We had a posting open, and I would like to have some slug testing done in these wells, you know, at a minimum, if I can't do a pump test, but, you know, just something to start getting some idea of some more of the parameters that we have. So some conductivity and permeability measured.
Maybe it's a good idea to move that over to Brian's data collection committee.
Yes.
Brian,
Thank you.
just to play on what Todd's talking about, and Sarah, we do have some buckets of money for data acquisition, and part of it is working with MGS, recognizing that, you know, when they're doing their quaternary mapping in these counties, they're doing rotosonic drilling. And it's probably one of the areas that we would look at is gamma logging and slug testing alongside of that, but you heard, I think, a month or two ago from Sydney Rahala on our Equus database, but those are the next levels of conversations that we're starting to have. Michigan Geologic Survey gave us some really good feedback this week because Equus is now like gonna be the housing and data record for WellLogic. And so we're focused right now on how data is inputted into that and how the public works with that data. So that's still within this Equus database, and we're trying to figure out how to improve those processes all with an intention to have that data set more and more meaningful to us. And then alongside of that, like our executive division is pushing us. They know on this Equus project, we've got like $7 million, and just the initial migration is like $2 million project. But very soon, we're gonna be under the gun to figure out what additional data sets might come into here. And that's some of the work that Sarah's talking about, is that's sort of the golden nuggets to start getting, where you've got like professionally done, you know, like from Katie's firm. I mean, we would love to create the carrot where if they do a boring log somewhere, that it's easy to do even on the state site and uploadable, you know, so that then everybody's got the power of professionally logged well bores, slug tests, things like that, to the extent they can be shared, available. And we're having a lot of those conversations to where a consultant like Todd, where he starts, how you put the power of these things, you know, whether it was stuff that right now you'd have to FOIA out of an SSR or these things, what can we light up? What can we put at folks' fingertips?
Adam, to that end, is the state considering with the money that you've got that you're looking to put into, you know, additional data collection for lithology and for, you know, and for soil borings and, you know, and all of the work that's going on, looking for opportunities to, whether that's through an RFP or some other kind of agreement or contract basis, going after some of the data that's collected either by engineering companies or hydrologists, or, you know, even if a farmer's collecting data. I mean, is that something that's on the state's mind, is like, how do we leverage some of our resources, and rather than paying to, you know, do the project from scratch, can we pay less to get some of the information that's already being collected out there?
Yeah, all of that's on the table. I mean, we've got the database, and we're putting the low hanging fruit data sets in, and we're being thoughtful on data input, and then the tools that somebody has for visualization or usage of that data. But then, and integration with other things like the framework. But no, we are thinking about partners. You know, we've talked about citizen science, but, you know, our agencies agree that, you know, you gotta, for the data to be useful and trustworthy, you've gotta have some protocol and QA/QC around those things. But to the extent that, you know, you got professional geologists and engineers logging soils all over the state.
Yeah, that's kind of the direction it's going. Less volunteer citizen science and more, you know, how can we contract for data that's collected by the professionals that know what they're doing?
And I'm open to that, but you know, how you get a firm like Bar to go, I mean, I remember conversations with the water well drillers in the past about electronic submissions, and, you know, it's carrot stick kind of stuff. And I think with the money that we have related to this database, we have the ability to maybe create some carrots, like some tools that make data migration easy into this system. It increases uniformity. But there's no stick, there's no statutory, you know.
Yeah. Well,
you drill the soil boring, so thou shalt share your data with the state.
Yeah, no, I'm not in favor of sticks when you don't need them.
Along those lines, I'll be getting to this a little bit in my presentation coming up, but MGS has that data gap analysis project that's implementing one of the previous council recommendations to review the existing data that's out there, identify where are the data gaps and prioritize those and make recommendations back to the council. So that all fits in.
Yeah, this has been fun, and I work not in geology, but I'm already thinking of a couple state databases that we use that have different components of this. I think you have kind of both, right? You have paper records and like spatial inaccuracies. And this is really equivalent. So like the one thing I would say is when it comes time to write up the results, what was learned here about the amount of time per record to correct an inaccurate location or other types of inaccuracies, the tools that might have been built to speed that up, and showing some breakdown of like how many hours, did it take per record to do this or that, so it's scalable, because there are plenty of public databases that are either public or not public enough that are dealing with the kind of sharing and receiving all the issues this has go way past this one system. And I think just like the insights from going through this activity, not so much the results for WellLogic, but just the process, how much time, what did you learn, what did you use to speed it up, would be very valuable to a lot of other divisions at other agencies wanting to think through like, hey, if I were to do a proposal for change or think through an investment to get all of our 50 years of paper records into the system and usable, or to correct database bad locations, they'd have to literally start at the beginning, right? And take some wild guesses about what that would be financially and time wise to do. And I think this effort's probably learned a lot about the process of correcting and scanning and all that type of stuff. That's probably really valuable. It doesn't help WellLogic, our program, but it's probably really valuable elsewhere. So
before we continue, I know Buddy's got a question and I want to make sure to get to you, but also the person who's connected by phone with the phone number and ending in 53, do you mind identifying yourself so that we've got record of who's participating in the meeting?
Hey, this is Dave Hamilton.
Oh, hey, Dave. Good to hear from you. All right, thanks. Buddy?
Oh, I was just going to make just a general statement. I mean, Todd's going down the right path with taking, and once we get the correct location on the well, get the gamma log. But as we all said here, thinking about this, and as we move forward, I want to just, put a little bit of history and some thought into our mind as we go forward, looking for money and what for and what direction to put it in. The people with the least amount of experience, meaning the well drillers, we're the ones that are required to put in a log. And the science and engineers out there, the ones that have the pedigree and actually know the terminology and the difference and how it all moves, are beholden to their customers, which I understand that, but are the ones that are not required to put in any information. So here we sit as this council with our hands tied, trying to figure out how to help our water resource unit, get a better idea on what we have and our resources out there. And we're the victim of our own circumstances as a society and how we've actually planned this forward. So as we all move forward, let's keep that in mind, that when we plan forward, let's make sure that the right people are putting in the right information, and it's good information.
yeah, thank you. Thank you, buddy. Go ahead.
I just thinking about that, MDOT, they go out there and they do poke a whole bunch of holes in the ground. It's exploratory engineering prior to a job, especially around bridges. I mean, that would be where we're getting them. Yeah, almost completely dump.
Great.
Yeah, we've been
different. Sorry, go ahead.
No. We've been talking with MDOT and they're more than happy to share their data with us. So we'll be using their data for our mapping And they do have those deeper geotechnical borings, especially for bridges, and they, are deeper. So I think we'll have some good data there. And then, how that works out with Eagle, I think there were some discussions before.
Last couple of things I have it, on the fishery side, right? So we actually have to get a permit in order to try to do any fisheries assessment. So if we step in the stream, try to do an electrofishing survey, whatever it is, if we're gonna take fish, not angling under a license, there is a whole permit system, fish collection permit system. And in that's a nice hook, because anybody asking for that permission to go sample fish can be required to report data from that activity. So I know that that's not the same, but I was hearing, and I know not everybody loves, some people like carrots from sticks, but on the fish side, I mean, that mechanism is there, and it can force nice conversations, right? About how do you want data? One thing I've learned, right, is that sometimes we can get really bogged down in the QA, QC, the protocols before we're willing to accept something and hold it in a data storage system. And that's good for great reasons, but really the protocols behind it, the QA, QC is really about how somebody chooses to use it. And so sometimes I've seen a lot of data that can't get past the QA, QC, so you don't put it in the storage system. And when it's not in the storage system, nobody knows it exists. You can, if you wanted to use it, if it's the only data point in that area, you couldn't even choose to use it with a greater level of uncertainty and softness around it, include that, because it just doesn't exist anymore. So it's my one little thing is like, I'd rather have everybody put data in and put notes about, hey, warning or collected this way, but if it doesn't get stored, it doesn't exist within a couple of years.
That's our philosophy too, is we don't want to alienate. I mean, some data sets under our control, like WellLogic, you would hope that you'd have a certain level of control on that and other ones, but no, we agree in the ecosystem, we would rather have some of those data sets in there, be recognized in their usefulness. But you just need metadata and documentation alongside of that. So if you're a researcher in academia or USGS or somewhere, is it, the full data set showing this, if you remove these two data sets, it might be, surety, what does that look like? But we still think there's power in that data.
Say, my only concern is that on public lands, certainly fine, private lands, they have to be almost to the discretion of the landowner, whether they want to share that or not, so.
Yeah. Hence why I say I like carrots a lot better than sticks, because sticks get complicated real quick. Todd's got a question as well.
Todd Feenstra.
Yeah, thanks again I'm chipping in again here. But Brian, I'm totally agreeing with what you're saying and totally understand and get behind what you're saying about grading the quality of the data. USGS already does that on stream profiles or stream discharge measurements. Those are all graded, whether they're, that very well, whether they're excellent, good, fair, or poor. And so you take that with a grain of salt and you want to throw that data into any type of analysis. The only other thing that I would make a comment on too, and especially when talking about verifying lithologies in particular, it's good, I think, for everyone to keep in mind that, irrigation wells for crop irrigation represent about 85% of the large quantity withdrawals. And so if those are the most heavily regulated, or at least represent the most regulated withdrawals, it's definitely in our benefit to try to collect as much information as we can in those areas. And there seems to be a bit of a lack there right now. So it's an easy thing to miss, I think, as we talk about a robust thing for the entire state. And we talk about all the different data sets. One of the good things to remember, I think, is how much information is at those locations that are the primary ones that are falling under the MIWA for regulation.
Any other thoughts? Good, robust discussion.
David Lush.
Oh, Dave Lush. Go ahead, Dr. Lush.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that in the Equus project, I'm sure it is already included, but I just wanted to confirm it that the oil and gas well records are going to be migrated into the Equus system. But more importantly, from our perspective, traditionally, if you look at an oil and gas well log, it typically says, 0 to 400 feet, glacial deposits, and then they start logging every centimeter of the bedrock because that's their target, of course. And anything we could do through, I don't know if it's the Mineral Wells Act or other authorities to say, no, you do have to log what you encountered going down to the bedrock, would be quite helpful because they drill in areas of very thick drift up in the northern part of the Lower Peninsula where water wells typically don't go, and that would help tremendously in defining really an unknown resource, very similar to drilling to bedrock project that MGS is currently doing associated with their county or quadrangle mapping. So again, it's one thing to capture the data as is. It's another thing to use whatever authorities are applicable to ask the oil and gas drilling industry to log the glacial deposits on their way to bedrock.
It's a good one to stash away. I won't put Adam on the spot, but
Oh, that's all right.
maybe not on private, but I mean, as far as the public leasing, you can put lease conditions on leases if it's public.
Right.
Those data sets are available through our oil and gas databases, and it's not part of the initial migration, but we might figure out whether we need to duplicate it or link to it so that folks have access to that in both ways. But I mean, he's absolutely right. I mean, setting surface casing on oil and gas, I mean, obviously they're not looking for minerals. They're going 100 feet below fresh water and into competent bedrock. So they're doing rotary drilling, and they really don't care until they start seeing chunks of rock coming up. So there's not much useful there in terms of glacial aquifer stratigraphy. And then, Sarah didn't mention it, or Buddy, but, we do want to continue education of water well drillers to help improve some consistency. And we're working with the well logic input factors. We can't take away all the favorite terms or descriptions, but, I think there was like 200 some in the system, like possible lithologies. So we are trying to boil that down, and we're talking about some descriptions that are allowed for a time, like some that just aren't allowed, period. They're like local flavor and they're not particularly useful. And some that we recognize probably would really irritate people in the short term. And then, something that's more aligned with the unified classification system that, we should be gravitating towards, but that needs to happen over some time, recognize that, but we're having some of those conversations as well.
All right, thank you. Thanks. If there's nobody yelling that there's a hand up online, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is Eagle updates. And I think you have a fairly robust list.
Yep. So, good afternoon. This is the program update for Eagles Water Use Program. Person comes up. So I'm going to update you on some water use assessment unit staffing. I'm going to provide a list of funded projects, both legislative appropriations for council recommendations and others that are using other funding sources. Emily already gave an update on the integrated assessment case study project. I'm going to provide some updated 327 metrics. I'll provide an update on Michigan potash. Finally, I'll answer any questions you might have. So I like being able to start the Eagle program update with some good personnel news for a change. So sitting behind Ross, I'd like to introduce Garrett Lake, We started on February 3rd, filling one of our 2 SSR geologist vacancies. Mike Jugel is gonna fill the other one, and he will start on March 3rd, so I'll be sure to bring him to the April meeting and introduce him to you all. Okay, so the first group of funded projects are IT projects. Some of these projects are funded by legislative appropriations to implement some of the council recommendations, and or they are funded using other funding sources for IT projects. So that includes the groundwater data management system, which uses the environmental EarthSoft environmental quality information, or EQUIS software. Council recommendation to upgrade some of the features of the online water withdrawal assessment tool, including improvements to the user interface. That's one of the council recommendations. Updates to the depletion tools, which is now our term for what otherwise known as the bench tools. And also another council recommendation to update the aquifer properties used by the tool's groundwater model, for example, transmissivity, storage coefficient. There are a number of ARPA legislative appropriations for a council that use federal ARPA funding. The first is to recommendation that Eagle needs to become a new data provider to the National Groundwater Monitoring Network run by USGS, and that's, we actually obtained a USGS grant. We're in year 1 of 2 for that. Another funded project, the Michigan Hydrologic Framework and the Michigan Integrated Water Management Database. You've already heard about the recommendation to increase water conservation and efficiency in agriculture, and also the recommendation to advance Michigan's water conservation and efficiency efforts. And I mentioned the MGS project for the data gap analysis and make recommendations for future data collection priorities. And Katie talked briefly about the ongoing transition probability mapping project that BAR is doing in Calhoun and Cass counties. ARPA and legislative appropriations also include cumulative downstream depletion tracking, what I refer to as a complex water budget. So looking at from the headwaters all the way out to the mouth of major watershed, tracking cumulative streamflow depletions, but also recharge back to the stream. So along with the complementary to that is Howard's project, USGS research project in water management areas. Brian talked about the recommendation for inland lakes. And we just had a meeting with USGS this morning. Their geologic and hydrogeologic, what's the terminology we use for that now, Howard?
Geologic and hydrogeologic data enhancement project.
There you go. What Howard said. So that's got 4 components: an aerial magnetic or AEM geophysical survey, drilling additional monitoring wells, installing additional stream gauges, and also doing groundwater modeling. And the photo you see there is an example of the AEM antenna hoisted by a helicopter. So that will provide information about the glacial geology and depth to top of bedrock. Other funded projects sources include the groundwater proposal for change, a $15 million pot of money that includes PFAS soil fate project that's being run by MPART. Historical PFAS work being Water Resources Division is in charge of that project. Our Materials Management Division is doing a project on sampling and analytical. And GRMD, groundwater mapping and monitoring wells. And we've got a number of joint funding agreements with USGS for water use data collection that includes stream gauges and miscellaneous stream flow measurements, and also the ongoing Mission Doe Aquifer modeling project. The photo you see there is an example of one of our miscellaneous stream flow measurements. Other projects, GRB has a grant to support the operations of the Michigan Geological Survey. And Emily already talked about the funded project for the Water User Committee guidebooks. So, and Emily already talked about the integrated management study, so I will move on to the metrics. So January 1st through February 6th, registrations registered. We have 26 done through the tool and another 24 done as site-specific reviews. This is a map of the watershed depletion status as of February 2025. In green, zone A, over close to 4,200 water management areas. 882 that are in yellow in the zone B. And I should note that that includes zone B cold transitional streams. Another 204 in the orange that are zone C. And 25 that are in zone D pending review by Eagle in red. And note that zone B cold transitional, all zone C and all zone D can't pass the tool, so then the water user would have to request a site-specific review by Eagle. An update on the Michigan Potash by Everett, south of Everett. The comment period for air quality revisions to the air quality permit closes on midnight on Thursday, the 13th. And there's a link there for submitting public comments. We just did, Water Resources Division just did a public information meeting that had staff give presentations from air quality, GRMD, MWRD on the existing proposed permits. WRD is going to have a virtual public hearing on their wetlands permit application for Michigan Potash also on the 13th at 6 p.m. In addition, GRMD has the Part 625 mineral well solution mining and also the disposal well permits that are joint with EPA, right, Adam? And I'm going to summarize Michigan Potash's Part 327 status in the next slide. So Michigan Potash currently has 2 water withdrawal assessment tool registrations. The first beginning 9325, Devitt's Hoagie Creek, water management area 6282, and also 10557. That's a 380 gallon per minute pump capacity. That registration expires by August 16th of this year if the pump is not installed and connected to a power source. The well has been drilled, there's a log in WellLogic, but to date, no pump has been installed in the well. It hasn't been, obviously, the pump hasn't been hooked up to a power source. Tool registrations and SSR registrations are valid for 18 months, but the withdrawal has to be capable of being put into operation, meaning that you got to drill the well, you got to install the pump and hook it up to a power source within 18 months where the registration expires. You got to start over again. The other registration they have 9326, that was the 10557. That's for 1,000 gallon pump capacity registered. Notice that the total registered pump capacity for the 2 is 1380 GPM. Coincidentally, just below the 1389 threshold that would trigger requiring a Part 327 permit application. And again, those registrations expire by August 16th of this year if they don't. Wells are both drilled in logs, but no pump in the wells, not connected to a power source. So they gotta install a pump, hook it up to a power source by mid-August. Otherwise, those registrations expire and they start over, which historically they've gone through multiple registrations expiring and having to re-register. So the two water management areas, 6282 Pogie Creek drains directly to west to the Muskegon River, and 10557 drains to the north, Big Stone Creek, but also to the Muskegon River. Those are both classified as cool streams. Pogie Creek 6282 is currently in Zone A and has 221 gallons per minute stream flow currently available. Big Stone Creek 10557 currently in Zone C and has 291 GPM still available. And this map is a map of the area. The two tool registrations, I don't know if you can see my pointer, but those two red dots in the middle of the screen are the locations of those two tool registrations. And that's the red polygon there to the west is the Pogie Creek, and the red polygon going to the north there is the Big Stone Creek. So that's what I've got. Are there any questions?
Jim, going back to kind of the beginning of your presentation, can you talk a little bit about what the water use assessment unit is doing to change the user interface? And also can you give any detail or let me know where I can find more detail about the projects that are being done related to phosphate and transport?
So some of the updates to the tools user interface currently, and Megan, jump in here if you want, but allowing the user to see what the watershed depletion status is and also view other previously authorized registrations in that water management area, correct? Anything else you want to add to that?
Getting a large facelift in general. There's gonna be, like it says, the patch tools were gonna rename, so they should be made available. For everybody, that will all be published under like the USGS out, so hopefully publicly accessible code should be on the table there. Before we have to write. Yeah. Is there anything else you need to know?
Essentially, it's getting an update just because some of the software technology that supports the interface is getting kind of out of date. And essentially it should still function as it currently does. We're building in some additional functionality into the interface should someone want to. But ultimately, if you don't want to have to engage with all those additional features that we're going to try to build in, you don't have to, but you can still go through the process as you currently do, where you can go through and register using Hunt 99 as your default mode and a lot of the default parameters that are already established and, have been vetted, by the council. So it's going to be the same tool essentially, but with some new bells and whistles kind of attached.
And the depletion tool updates. So the tool uses the Hunt 99 analytical solution. Behind the scenes, currently, we have the depletion tools for the Hunt 99 analytical solution, but also the Hunt 2003 and the Ward and Luff 2011 analytical solutions. So as part of that IT project to update the tool, those depletion tools are going to be updated. The tool is still going to use the Hunt 99, but the other depletion tools for the Hunt 2003 Ward and Luff 2011 are going to be updated. And that will be a user, correct me if I'm wrong, again, correct me if I misspeak here, but my understanding is that an external user, if they can't pass the tool and want to request an SSR, they can provide the information and say, hey, I want to use the Hunt 2003 or I want to use Ward and Luff 2011, and here are the parameters that you need to run those tools. Is that more or less accurate?
That's correct. I think the plan is to have a more in-depth presentation at the next council meeting.
It speaks directly to some of the criticism that the groups received in terms of trust, that the department has this other group of batch tools that they use for SSR review. This is going to allow a consultant, a user, whatever, to use the other solutions and depletion tools, see what the answer is, and then move forward with an SSR and allow us to validate and interact, hopefully a little different with folks, but it should address some of that criticism and improve transparency, so that folks get to see the solutions that we've used.
I think that's great. And during the process, that's beyond what I use it for, but I've had certain things where just like clicking on a data layer and trying to get it to tell me what the index flow for that area. And I've received gracious replies from Andy and patients when I'm like, why is it not showing? So you gotta click it twice so it's highlighted in like bold, dark blue around the word. Thank you. But if there's any of those that could be that user interface is important. And like I'm increasingly getting our members who are trying to learn about stuff and trying to teach them to find some of the information for themselves, that context if they hear about something, which streams are nearby, like what are the predicted index flows, and like trying to teach that if it's kind of hard to get that stuff so that's awesome that you're doing.
It's a big focus. We went through the previous recommendations in regards to the types of interface updates that, the council wanted to see. And we kind of started from there. And definitely the intuitive interaction with being able to identify the balances is one of the things that we spent time focusing on.
So did I miss out on the secret handshake instructions?
I was also gonna ask for where I can find some more information about the work being done on the PFAS soil and water tests for current legacy sites.
That probably talk to Abby Hendershot and them.
Okay.
Be my recommendation.
Okay, if I can.
Was there another, I thought I saw a hand up.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Dave.
Thanks, Jim. Could you go back to the last slide reporting on the 2 water management areas involved with the potash project? Yeah. So when you show the 221 gallons a minute and the 291 gallons a minute available, that has already debited the registrations that haven't been completed from the potash people. Is that right?
Yeah, so after those registrations, there's still 221 GPM available in the Pokey Creek and 291 still available in the Big Stone Creek.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
I would love to just ask and make sure I get a sense of how your federal funding is working for you this last week or so. And I know that what I'm receiving and tracking through our national organization is that it's the bipartisan infrastructure and the Inflation Reduction Act that are still very much frozen and not being reimbursed properly. ARPA may be different. Knowing that so many of these are federal funded, what's the outlook for you the last week and the coming weeks as far as, is this frozen? Is it already moving?
It changes day by day. And last week Lena called and said, we're out. We can't do any other stuff for 3 hours. And then she called back and said, we're back on it. So the latest we hear is this is pretty solid.
Okay. Okay.
So
anything to add? I mean, I know it's evolving, but I know there's real consequences. Even if everything's going to be okay, it doesn't cover payroll while it's not okay. Are there freeze ups that you are very worried about having to do?
It's kind of premature, but like you said, we had frozen stuff and now things are unfrozen. And so the accounts are technically unfrozen right now, but we're in a weird transition period. I mean, we're lucky to have Howard here because literally most of our meetings with federal partners are canceled indefinitely. Like they're not even talking to us while we're in this transition period, and funding is kind of like that too. So we you know, our orphan well program, our methane emission reduction program, this water work that comes from IRA. And then, you know, James speak to all the climate work. We're in various weird places right now. So I would not say we're in a great place right now while we're trying to figure out how all this shakes out. I'm hoping there's always some freeze and some reconsideration that happens with administration change, but obviously the freezing of accounts and a hard reset on everything is new or feels new, and we're hopeful that things are gonna be lit up, the things that we care about, because it's hard to plan right now, especially when, I mean, we've had federal partners hang up on us like, oh, I can't talk to you right. And, so you guys are in a tough spot. We're kind of in a tough spot. We're just hoping that stuff kind of smooths out. I don't know, James, anything else on?
Yeah, just that it is very much in flux. And you can have an open account, but not be able to access it. And, you know, so there's all these middle grounds that we're falling into. But hopefully it will get resolved. But at this point, it's day to day. And it depends on funding stream.
Yeah.
It depends on which department you get it through and lots of other factors.
Yeah. So stuff's kind of technically unfrozen. That's the account status that our grants people might send, but when you send through a request for reimbursement, you get an error, or it's just pending and nobody's talking to you, so.
Yeah, it's unfrozen, but we're not paid.
Yeah.
Well, that's important. I mean, I also, you know, I think most of us, right, that deal with this, you're trying to keep on timelines, not over panic. But if stuff doesn't get paid, at some point you do have to say, stop accruing. Like, stop working on this for a while. And just, you know, for our planning on some of these, I know it's not all of it, but I don't want to like start going like, hey, let's have some meetings on this and let's like really dive in on this. And have somebody go, can't really have them filling those hours right now and stacking up time on this when they're need to be timed out for great reasons. So I thought I'd ask that question.
Hopefully this ARPA funding, I mean, we've just launched $4 whatever million worth of work with USGS, and we're excited about the projects that Jim showed you. That money's got to be spent by December of 2026. That are ARPA funding, so this little hiccup wasn't in our timeline.
Yeah. Buddy's got a question.
Great, thanks.
Buddy, go ahead, buddy.
Sorry about that, Jim. Hang on. Just curious, and I'm sitting here thinking about all these projects going on. Has there been any movement on the Dickinson Creek study, Jim?
Oh, Dana just walked out of the room. Yes, we have information, but I think in fairness, like, we need to get together next step with talking to his client before we say a whole lot more about that. I don't know, Jim, you got a different opinion in Lena's absence?
No, I'll defer to Lena, so.
I mean, we have a depleted area, but, you know, without getting into any details, we want to talk with that, you know, with Todd and his client, before we share anything else.
No, I understand. Yeah, because I have clients there too that are not his clients that are all hooked to it. So, and it wasn't just a personal question. It was like, this has been sitting out there for a while, so I was kind of curious where it was. Okay, thank you. That's fine.
Lena's back. Buddy wants to talk about Dickinson Creek. And he's got clients in that area too, but I just said that you had wrapped up your model, but in fairness, getting into a whole lot of details, probably me with Todd and his client, but I don't know, if there's anything higher level you want to say about it? There's no water.
Well, I think that is something to talk about actually, and we should talk probably first before we share that with everybody here. But I think maybe one of the biggest lessons learned is there's a big difference between what's registered for and what's actually being used. in the watershed, and that can have a big impact on what kind of impacts we're actually seeing in the stream versus what the tool is predicting that is actually occurring. Yeah, that's pretty much the takeaway.
Well, thank you for answering. Appreciate it.
Yeah, sorry, I can't give you more details right now. I think we just get our ducks in a row a little bit. But I know everybody is curious about the project and would probably like to see a lot of the work that went into it, both on my end and then also on Todd. Then, you know, he was able to give us a lot of really solid work that went into the support of the determination and kind of started as a launching pad for additional work that happened on top of that. So I think there were a lot of good lessons learned from the whole project.
Some of you are well aware of this, like what she said, but that was a little surprise to me as I'm trying to come up to speed with this program is why might a zone D already be overdrawn, and some of the history might lie in sort of the grandfather withdrawals that were either early geology passes or whatever reason some of those might occur, but some of those are zone Ds and actually showing overdraw, not just no water available, but overdrawn historically. And we expect that those situations are where we're going to have these tough conversations moving forward. And again, the importance of the data and then thinking about solutions around that. We fully anticipate those hard conversations coming of, okay, you know, the depletion budget's showing there's not water there yet. Streams, you know, you imagine all the conversations and how we work with the stakeholders on those things. Exciting.
Capacity versus use has always been.
Any other questions? One thing on the airborne geophysics, Jim showed that slide. It's a very visible data collection activity with a helicopter flying a couple 100 feet over the ground, trying, you know, dangling this big hoop.
Couple 100 feet.
Yeah, so we'll plan to make a presentation to the council in a future meeting, give a little more detail about what it does, what we're looking for to set expectations. But it's a really great data collection activity that can cover a large area cost effectively. And I think we'll partner well with the work that MGS is doing, the transition probability work. It works well in rural locations where there's not a lot of infrastructure. So there's not a lot of infrastructure, there's not a lot of wells and well logic. This might help fill in those gaps. And it will give us an image of the unconsolidated material. They can go down into the bedrock. We're going to work with the Geology and Geophysics group in Denver. That's actually a contractor that flies that stuff. But our group in Denver will work with the contractor and do the geophysical inversion. But they'll work with us in terms of the design. So we plan a few months of working with the group at Eagle to help design the area of the survey, identify local stakeholders. They want to put some skin in the game and expand that area. And then figure out how to communicate with local people, local stakeholders, tribal entities, and let people know what's happening well in advance. So you don't find out when the helicopters, you know, buzzed by your property 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
That would not be good. So
We're looking at an area kind of.
Yeah, the kind of the big orange area in the southwest, our first target.
We would love to get some notification of when your contract is going to be out there so that we can send out the notice to farmers, because otherwise, yeah, I don't want that chaos.
That way the USGS.
Yeah, it's
So it's gonna be probably a year before the flight, and so we're really gonna work hard on communications. But I wanna work through the Water Use Advisory Council, since you have the contacts in different agencies and local government, Farm Bureau, and really get the word out through the Water Use Advisory Council to have feedback, and then we can, we can update the progress. And we talked to our colleagues in Wisconsin who ran a similar set of flights up by Door County. And the acronym in Wisconsin is DATCAP, Department of Agriculture and
Trade and consumer.
there you go, yeah. They worked with DATCAP and DATCAP actually put a website out that was the flight tracker. And so every day they updated, this is how far the helicopter has flown and this is our flight zone, and you could kind of judge when it was gonna come by your area. So we're super excited about the data collection opportunities for this. I think it's something that's really been brought up a lot to complement well logic and other direct borings, and that certainly doesn't replace things. We need direct sampling as well, but it'll give us some ability to, start connecting those well spacings that are really far, and to start looking at that, how well streams may be connected to those shallow subsurface that people are using for drilling. So yeah, just kind of a warning that will be coming for public outreach help, and try to use the council's contacts as much as possible over the next year.
Yeah, I can see a lot of partners interested and a lot of logistics on your part. Having experimented with flying heavy objects suspended by helicopters, there's a lot of requirements for where you are not allowed to go on hanging stuff from a helicopter. So that's a fun effort. I see a lot of partners being pretty viably interested in your add-on concept if in the area. And
That's a legitimate thing, because Howard was hinting at it, but a lot of the cost is just getting that equipment here. So if there's other partners that have interest in aerial electromag, open to that, and there's cost benefits there.
Yeah, the flight time and mobilization for that stuff, I found out it's really expensive. Super fun, but not.
Frank's got a question.
Good. Yeah, thanks. And I'm sure you're gonna get funny comments when people think that you've come up with a technique that will avoid their tinfoil hat.
And part of our outreach, I'm not guessing what Frank might have to say, but that is part of our plan, is engaging tribal communities, so that they're aware of and find out whether they want reservation land or other Indian country flown or not flown. That's all part of USGS's engagement on something like this.
Yeah, a lot, yeah. Did you say Frank?
Yep.
Frank?
Well, you took the words out of my mouth in terms of concern. Just wanting to be sure, sharing the concern about being sure that tribes are notified and have a chance to have input into any process before there's overflights. I know that this did cause some issues in Wisconsin area. We've had pretty good discussion about these things in Michigan so far, but what's the plan for engaging with the tribes on when you're going to be in the tribal reservation areas?
The plan is to talk to you and get the right contacts for the area being flown. We're gonna try to do that in the next month or so. Start conversations really early to identify where the tribal land is and other publicly sensitive land, so we can include that in the planning.
We assume reservation lands will be survey skips that you just won't want it unless, Gun Lake, they're very, or Pokagon Tribe, they're very progressive in thinking about water quality. I mean, they may not want reservation land, but then again, they may want to know things about their water resources, depth, bedrock, things like that. So, but I think likely the survey will skip reservation land, but then it's also going to be important to find out if there's other Indian lands, non-reservation land that also need to be skipped. These surveys, they can only be done in remote areas, and as Howard said, so if there's a lot of overhead lines, pipelines, linear features, houses, there'll be a lot of skips in that, even though it's a big survey area. They're not going to be doing any work in densely populated areas around Kalamazoo or something.
Right.
Yeah. The Eagle Tribal liaisons will be collaborating with the USGS staff, and we'll be generally reaching out to the tribes.
I guess just another quick question on this. This is obviously looking at at land, mapping land. But what about inland lakes and streams and other bodies of water? Is that part of this survey too?
Well, they generally fly the river corridor to see the sediments below the river. The survey itself won't pick up the bathymetry of the lake or river or anything like that. So they're not detailed enough to get the bathymetry, but they'll be able to get an idea of the sediments below the water bodies.
Thank you.
That's really one of the reasons. There was a big survey flown in the Mississippi alluvial plain, the Mississippi Delta area. They do a ton of irrigation down there. They flew the river corridors in addition to parallel lines to try to put together that picture of where the sediments, the deeper aquifers were connected, more well connected to the rivers.
So Dave Lush, you got a question?
Yeah, Howard, can you tell us crudely what the vertical resolution of this system is?
Well, that's gonna, they can tune that to the target for the, the target depending on what kind of hoop they use and also this line spacing. So over the next few months, we're gonna work with the geophysicists in Denver and Eagle to say, in this part of the state, top of rock is 300 feet, and is there a underlying aquifer that we're interested in, or is it the cold water shale that, that we're gonna stop there, and then see what kind of resolution we get. The one in Door County, and they were really worried about the glacial deposits over a fractured bedrock, down to the first, like, are you within 5 feet of the surface or 10 feet of the surface? So they tuned their survey to look very shallow, and it's a trade-off between if you tune it for shallow, you can't see deep, and if you tune it for deep, you don't get as much resolution shallow. So that's where we're gonna where we plan to work with Eagle and the guys in Denver to find the survey that's gonna work for us the best.
So I'd like to recommend, you probably already have thought of it, but and we don't need to be the only focus of it, obviously, but at least a few small transects in Cass and or Calhoun County to give us yet another way to assess the transition probability model that Barr is doing there would be quite useful.
Yeah, I wrote that down as soon as I saw it was Cass and Calhoun, because Cass, those are in the initial block kind of area, so, yeah.
I could certainly see the value of overlap with some of the transition probability work with Michigan Geologic Survey, county by county effort. As the person that has the resources up north, I will say this sounds like an awesome thing to do up there instead of completely in Southwest Michigan. This would be like a great compliment to say like, hey, where we aren't prioritizing with MGS, we'll flip flop that and we'll get some coverage in some less populated areas where we're going to wait a long time for that enhanced data collection. So you don't have to listen. I was obligated to throw that out.
No, we have some funding through the groundwater PFC, and we have the ability to add to this contract if we do it timely. We can identify additional pots of money and additional scopes of work while USGSC are doing these flights of other areas of the state to look at other geologic problems, fisheries problems, things like that. Open to those needs, scopes too, and we're able to come alongside if one of those financially or partner want to have those conversations. Got our hands full identifying, even in these massive flight areas, and you're talking about the density, are you looking for depth bedrock? Are you looking for bedrock valleys? There's a ton of different things that you can glean from this, but unfortunately, like resolution, it has a lot to do so the design study, gonna have to try and do what we can. Again, this is ARPA funding and we've got to launch part of that. That's why we're looking at these flights. We've got our hands full doing all the legwork to just get flights in. And I think a lot of the data acquisition may have to come post this ARPA funding.
I'll be delivered later. We get an initial inversion right away, but they clean up all the power lines and stuff like that, and provide something quick. And then they spend more time calibrating it. You know, it's not a direct measurement. That's, we still have to keep that in mind. So if there's saline water, you know, they're gonna pick up saline water as a signal, and we have to interpret whether that was a different with a logic unit or saline water within the aquifer, let's say.
All right, so we can count on you in a future meeting to maybe give us some more time to dig in and hear about it.
Yeah, either me or someone who knows more about
Yeah.
dangling from the other.
Understood.
Understood. Yeah.
All right, made a note for the next agenda. Unless there's any other questions out there, we'll move on. I usually prompt at time management, and I think we're fine, but I've enjoyed lots of good discussions and let for a while, but we'll move on to the next item. This was just intended again as a sort of an information sharing. This isn't a presentation, but it was brought to our attention that there was a bill last session. There's some continuing maybe work groups or informal work groups about some concepts that are relevant potentially to large quantity water withdrawals. I believe I'm correct in saying that they're also built in that data center water usage component to some degree. I'm not firsthand in those meetings at this point, so we were just hoping when we talked about it as an executive committee that it seemed like a good opportunity to let people share what their knowledge of this is so that everybody can be aware and then also gauge collectively its level of relevancy to the charge of this committee. So, who's been at some of the meetings?
I thought, based on our executive committee, maybe I would kick it off with a high level discussion. Then I know some of Kelly and I think Laura, were you at that last meeting? I believe Kelly was. Potato growers were involved, but anyway, at a high level, what Senate Bill 1181 is and current draft that's being talked about, it's pretty simple in 327 in the sense that one area it touches on is that if you have these new large quantity water withdrawers over 2 million gallons and a system upgrade needs to occur to like a municipal system, that the users their rate can't go up related to that. And then the real intent of the bill, the meat of it is basically saying new users to consumptive use over 2 million gallons, you would have to draw that from a Great Lakes source, either directly from the Great Lakes or a municipal system that's connected by the Great Lakes. And Senator, her involvement with the potato growers and so forth is trying to vet, like, who does that impact? Who would that negatively impact? And so data centers, we've heard that could use up to 500 or 5 million, my units.
Yeah.
You know, and aquifers are being depleted in other parts of the country. And so part of what I was going to do is just share with you, I mean, the department, I think, is, you know, we're supportive of that kind of concept from a standpoint of like these big users consumptive users that they would take from the Great Lakes. It takes the groundwater impact off the table. It's the most conservative approach to that. And it would be based on consumptive. So the work group conversations around that is, should it be consumptive or should it be all uses? And I know the aggregates industry, they still have some users over 2 million. I don't know. Have we identified any other users consumptive users, big groups that
consumptive use over 2 million gallons per day. It's gonna be limited just to our power plants, a couple of net reefs, but yeah, consumptive use, meaning evaporated, lost, and gone away. It's just that sector.
So right now, like I said, I mean, the concept seems to have merit with the department. We're just trying to provide feedback and we want to be involved. Trying to think through the unintended consequences of this. I mean, obviously, maybe a data center can be located in proximity to the Great Lakes, but if there's another user that necessarily needs to be located in Grayling or somewhere interior, the Great Lakes water is not an option. You know, do you build in things that allow for some discretion? The department may, you know, if it's shown, demonstrated, blah, 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 how do you handle that? And then, so the senators put together this big work group, and I know that there's a few groups, folks that have been involved in these, and those are gonna continue. We're at the table.
Just to be clear, the bill number was last session, nothing has been introduced this session. The department has taken no position on legislation at this point. We're just trying to provide information. The one thing we did point out to the senator is that when it gets into talking about rates and who would pay for it, that Eagle has no experience in any water rate regulation and in general aren't interested in water rate regulation. And we made that clear to the senator.
And you put a giant red underline under that, because not only would you have riots in the countryside, but we'd also be, you know, potentially
it's written as
risking our compliance with the compact. The obvious question that comes up to me is, we built a pretty robust regulatory program for water withdrawals that looks at impacts to lakes and streams and looks at it, you know, and looks at impacts and fish populations and all the things. With the idea being that it's not anybody's job, not ours, not the state's, not, you know, not any other group to decide the winners and losers of who gets to use the water and who doesn't, so long as they're demonstrating that where they're withdrawing it from is not going to have an adverse resource impact. So I will say right off the bat, I'm super uncomfortable with just kind of setting a category of users who are already covered under, you have to go get a permit if you're using more than 2 million gallons a day. And here's all the things you got to do to get a permit, to additionally put on this classification. And oh, by the way, you can only withdraw water directly from the Great Lakes. Because to me that, you know, that kind of puts a camel's nose under the tent of now we're, you know, we all know who we're talking about when we're talking about these giant users. You know, are we picking winners and losers, and who's the next loser? So I'm really uncomfortable with this concept, given where we had, you know, given where we are with our regulatory program. It's supposed to be protective, and so if we're acknowledging that it's not, then we have bigger problems than just what we do about big data centers.
Like James said, I mean, when I say we have a position, I mean, there might be some merit to, you know, full conservative. It does protect groundwater, but like I said, we're engaged with these. We haven't done formal bill analysis on the draft. We haven't, you know, we're just at the table with everybody else, but the water rate business doesn't belong in 327 whatsoever. We don't have anything to do with that. And the senator gets that. And, you know, like James said, everybody knows how to find the senator and get on the work group to be invited. So that's kind of.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And if there was any confusion, we're not coming up with an opinion. Right? That's not our charge to do that. So it's just more just for everybody, information sharing and awareness. That's it. We're not charged with giving our opinions on active legislation.
Frank had a question?
Yes, I was involved in some of the setting up the original work group call and with the senator, and then though I was invited to the last call, I was unable to do so I had a conflict. But one of the big issues that was raised is in areas where they don't have strong groundwater regulations or water regulations as much, there have been some negative impacts on communities and on rural water supplies. And so there were a lot of people were raising concerns about this, which is what got this whole process underway in the first place. But one of the biggest issues that I've advised is you need to know what the current system is, what the compact is, because it was a blithely made statement. Well, we'll just have to amend the compact. And I said, that's not going to happen. That's not where you're going with this. You have to do this within the context of the existing regulations. You have to figure out what it is that you're trying to protect and how you want to do it. And a big part of it is that a substantial part of the state does not, present company accepted, does not understand how this whole process works in terms of large groundwater users. And they also don't understand the difference between the water use saved by the potato growers, and the water use that is done by industry. These numbers, what seems like huge numbers to some people, are just normal daily numbers in many industries. And so I think that there's a substantial amount of discussion around this that needs to happen. I'm not sure where it all is, but I am still in contact with the senator on this, and I expect the United Tribes of Michigan is having a legislative reception next week. And I know that this may be at least a brief topic of discussion amongst the various things that we do there. But tribes are expressing concern about large water uses in their areas, not just the data centers, but potentially the battery plants and other things that may be using and or releasing a substantial amount of water, whether it's consumptive use, but the change in drawing groundwater and then releasing it as warm water into a stream. The effort seems to me to be largely about what's going to be done in terms of the treatment and or release of water as opposed to evaporative use. So these are some of the questions that I was part of. There certainly aren't any answers yet, and I don't know where this is all going to go, but I just thought I'd let you know about my involvement at this point up to here to just be doing this. And Kelly, I see your hand went up. I know that your name came up in discussion recently with the senators, because I think you provided some good input last time. Thanks.
Yeah, I saw Kelly had her hand up and one other one that I didn't catch.
Looks like Dave was next.
Yeah, I'll just be quick. I'm no lawyer, but it seems to me that this is in violation of property owners' riparian rights to dictate that you have to use Great Lakes water. So I'm not sure it would stand a legal test, although that's kind of like sausage making and takes a long time.
Kelly, did you have something?
Yeah, I'll just add that so far everybody's spot on with how I kind of have seen this as well. I think her heart might be in the right place because she really wants to make sure she's protecting groundwater. I just think the way that they've gone about it was, I think they had some legislation they wanted to get out there right away, but there were a lot of unintended consequences. But the senator has been open to like, hey, I think you're missing some key people sitting at the table to talk about some of these things, and kind of all of the issues that everyone has brought up have kind of been put back on her and her team's plate to talk through. I like the fact that they're looking at protecting groundwater. I just think all of the different nuances, right? And making sure we're not picking winners and losers, but also looking at siting and, when we're bringing new industries to the state, do we need to look at what is the best place for siting? So this maybe goes back to your point, Dave, about, property rights and different things. I think this is a lot bigger hornet's nest than they thought it was going to be. The blanket language that they started out with, I was like, so the Lansing Board of Water and Light now needs to build a pipeline to the nearest Great Lakes. And they were like, well, that's not what we meant. So there's a lot of conversation that still needs to happen before I think this thing would really even be ready for some review in any sort of legislative body. So I think she's open to anyone who's interested. I don't think that it was, quietly picking people to meet in a back room. I think anyone who's interested or who has insights, she'd be more than happy to add to the group.
Thank you, Kelly. Did you?
I mean, I do think that I hear you, Laura, on not picking winners and losers and the slippery slope of the concepts in the bill. I do think it brings up a valid question and point, though, around what is like the long-term plan when it comes to siting and identifying places in the state that are better suited for large water withdrawals, right? I mean, like it's been a conflict between, like, it's public in the news, right? Like with battery plants coming in with this like drive, and it's not just in Michigan, right? It's across the region, like this drive to attract new businesses, right? And how much are the economic development arms at both the state level and the local level in knowledge with and communicating with state agencies around like, okay, where should we be putting these things? Because it's not just, well, we have this tract of land in Marshall, let's put, like, there's more to it, right? And some states, I think, are farther along in thinking through what this planning process looks like and including current and long-term water availability as like a resource when they're thinking through from an economic development lens where we should be siting facilities. And so I agree, like, I'm not speaking specifically on the bill, but like, I would like to start to explore what that long-term plan looks like rather than just kind of waiting for applications to come in and then having to go through the process of denying or modifying and having all of this, the public back and forth on it. I do think that there is some proactive work that could be done to better identify places in the state where we can start having conversations about longer term development. And I think kind of to Kelly's, part of what Kelly's point, like understanding the carrying capacity of different parts of the state, right? Like, I don't think necessarily local units of government, like, it sounds great to bring in a data center. But if you use up all of your water on the data center with the idea that long-term you want to have growth in population, you want to bring in some other facility that builds off the data center. If you use up everything with that initial project, there's nothing left afterwards. And so I think that this body, right, is a good place to be really spearheading some of those conversations moving forward.
Thanks. That's, to me, I think that the value of everybody sharing on this is to get us to reflect as Water Use Advisory Council with our charges. What are the relevant discussions? What are people struggling with that we should really work on and focus to address? And it's not so really not to do with this. It's really to put an application when we talk about something hypothetical. And so like making the connections, right? At the beginning of this, we talked a little bit about the climate migration study. Adam, you mentioned like, hey, we have some science where we can put on paper, sort of where different volumes of water are available. Like there's parts of the state not too far from Dickinson, right? Where if you were to go 1 mile away to the south, you're wide open. There's a ton, right? There's you get next just to the south of the Kalamazoo River, you're good. You go to the north side, it's a problem. And there are these really clear disconnections of what one of the original intents when I joined this water council 18 years ago. One of the things that everybody bragged about was here on a map, you can use this for siting. You can look where water is available and where it's going to be tight. And that utility of it has not come to fruition over the years at all, right? People still want to use water where they want to use it. We're not really using it as like a planning tool. People do the land part of it, the economic development planning, and then they wait for the water last and go, oh, they mean it's a problem. So I think that's like an issue that's there, but on the conservation and efficiency side, right? So a year ago, I brought up some concerns with certain types of commercial aquaculture facilities, and Aqua Bounty was a great example at the time. It was 4 million gallons a day run through the facility each day just to exit it and discharge. And it begs this question of when you're getting really high volumes, what are you doing for conservation efficiency? Are you going to use 4 million gallons a day because it's the cheapest, most convenient solution for you? Or because you really need that in order to do your business? And that's come up with the data centers too, right? So I only really wanted to make sure everybody shared because there's a lot of links. It's not our business to do this. Everybody can separately, right, have an opinion. It's just, this is helping to say, what are people struggling with? And we're supposed to be helping and making advice to the legislature on improvements to the program. And if they're struggling, it should be good cues to us on how we can make our work relevant by focusing on some of these questions. So
There are a couple more hands raised and Cats to Shevitz.
Pat, did you join?
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry my day got away from me. But I did catch a little bit of the discussion. Great conversation. I just wanted to add that the AWWA is meeting with the senator here in early March. So just like everybody else, we want to engage and keep up the conversation. But we don't necessarily agree with the proposal as is, but we appreciate being at the table instead of on the table. So that's all I had. Thanks.
Anybody else have their hand up?
Dave Mater had a comment. He said most of the power plants are or were located on the Great Lakes or nearby bays, for the very reason for large water withdrawal.
Adam made an interesting point. You said only 5 million gallons a day from the data centers.
That's what we've heard, yeah.
Like that. All right, so the bill says Great Lakes or body of water connected to the Great Lakes. So if I put one here in Lansing, what's the impact on the Grand River and if I take 5 million gallons of water out of the day?
We've informed the center on their words, how connection may not be appropriate. So we would clear it up to be only those St. Mary's River, the river connecting major bodies, not like
Yeah,
that.
Great Lakes and Connecting Channels was the most recent wording that I heard of.
Yeah, it needs clarification to us. I think we all know that she meant St. Mary's and Detroit River, but it needs some more clarification in terms of like estuary areas, Muskegon Lake, you know.
I mean, just whatever river it will rise the water in Michigan drains at some point, the Great Lakes
Heard that.
And this was not, you know, for existing power plants, it's for users like new users, 2 million and above, or somebody that's increasing capacity of 2 million. But yeah, you hit on the efficiency thing too. I think that's the big concern that folks have there is that you've got an industry that is a large water user and you don't want to make them a loser, but yet it doesn't seem like there's any regulation that, you know, or policy around them choosing the cheapest option, which is, you know, cooling, doing theirs through kind of, you know.
Except for the conservation measures that are required as part of 327, if you are going through the process and, you know.
We won't go too far there.
Going into
Right,
zone-
like,
zone
that's
C
one
and
of
all
the things we should grapple with is because there's part of the public here, decision makers are saying that they're struggling with what is reasonable. And our answer on that sector is the sector tells us what they think is reasonable. That's a disconnect on the conservation and efficiency standards, right? Like it can be a mismatch having an industry-only originated standards for that. These are just good elements that I think that they're just really useful reminders that we still have a lot of work to do on some of these things.
So what Laura would say or thinks that Andy can deny that permit if they haven't adequately demonstrated efficiency measures under 327 considered alternate cooling methods?
I'd be interested in how Andy would answer that question.
You don't have to do that just yet. It is one of the criteria on a water withdrawal permit. Application is
Right.
adherence to the water conservation measures.
Yeah.
We don't have the established 4 data centers, specific water conservation measures for data centers. So it's generic, they point to, but it's pretty vague.
But I think that's like, to your point, like, that's a really key conversation, right? Because there is a wide range of what, again, I'm not harping on data centers. I don't care if it's a unit of AI or a unit of corn going to an ethanol plant, like, it's all a use, right? But there's a wide range of what data centers can and can't do to move heat, essentially. And there's a lot of work around like reuse, right? And recycling of water. There's rainwater capture, there's air, like, there are other opportunities out there. And so if we are relying on the industry to say, well, we looked at alternatives and the best thing we can do is pump 5 million gallons a day. Like, are we just, I guess I don't want to get to the point where that application is in front of the department and then the department is deciding what is a feasible like alternative or efficiency standard for the industry.
That can be tough without specific sideboards for an agency like ours, like feasible and prudent alternatives. Economics is that conversation's been around forever. Like, can you even consider the economics, or how much can you press a company? What's reasonable? They say, well, like, this evaporative cooling is the least expensive option, and then going to the next expensive thing is a 300-fold, and the economics don't bear out. And so it's just a no. Like, we don't have good guidance on that thing.
And that's right. And I would love to, and again, not for right now, but like, love to understand, right, how that economic consideration is taken, because again, I'm just gonna use like a potato grower, right, has a much different economic portfolio than an Amazon. And so to say to Amazon, well, yep, you're gonna have to spend more. I think they have the margins and room to do that, right? And then I understand, right, that gets into then, are we picking winners and losers? But like, there is the reality of the economic piece of the companies that are moving into the space, right?
Without hard regulation on that, that's a pretty squishy and ugly space for us to.
Reasonable use. We'd have to find it, be a reasonable use before we can give them a permit.
Did you want to ask another question?
We'll take, this is awesome. We'll take one or two more before we do the wrap up stuff. Dr. Lush, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to return to a bigger issue which is troubling me, and that is, and I don't know if Kelly or Frank or others who have been involved with the discussions can answer this, but was this legislation or bill proposed because the senator was ignorant of 327, or because the senator thought 327 was ineffective in controlling this kind of use?
Dave, that would only be up to speculation and a question for the legislative sponsors.
Yeah, she had some basic understanding of 327 and decided it wasn't sufficient in her mind to address the issue.
Right, the bill was to amend 327.
The fact that data centers popped up and has triggered a lot of questions and interest and concern the only thing I want all of you to take away from it is that everybody else doesn't walk around with part 327 on their mind. And And,
That's crazy talk.
our outreach efforts earlier were part of that discussion that, you know, we have to constantly make sure that people understand the program, the needs of what it does, what it doesn't do, and seats change very quickly these days. And so that's just a ongoing responsibility for us.
Yeah,
For
that's
sure.
what I wanted to loop back to is your earlier discussion for legislative outreach or outreach to the legislature vis-a-vis this program and the council. It just seems to me that when groundwater comes up in any form, fashion, or thought within the legislature, the council should be immediately contacted. And if they don't know about us, that's our fault. And we need to be vigilant that because of the turnover of legislators, that we continually make them aware not only of the council, but at least of the broad brush protections of groundwater that 327 provides. And I personally would be interested in hearing the specifics of in what ways did the senator think 327 wasn't going to cut the mustard here? Because that's something that the council should know about and discuss.
Thank you, Dave. Anything else? I think I'm going to pull the plug on this and go through the wrap-up session of the meeting. Is that okay? Good. Check. All right. Don't tell me if somebody has their hand raised on the line. Our next meeting dates are April 8th, June 10th, August 12th, October 14th, and December 9th. You'll have those kind of nested on the agenda, so if you haven't put them into your calendar already, please do. With
I
that,
think Brianna has sent both calendar invites out earlier.
It was Trisha, actually,
Tricia, okay.
so you should have them.
I was ready to give you credit.
Well, and Frank, I know you said you were interested in potentially hosting one of those meetings up north at the tribal center. Is that right?
Well, I was made an offer that I would attempt to get to a tribal facility. How far north it was, I'm not certain. It would depend. I'm having a meeting next week where I can talk to some of the tribes and see what programs they have and what things they would like to showcase. I know there's some new facilities at Gun Lake, for instance, there at south of Grand Rapids, and just be interested to see. I'd like to find out how it relates to our work and what other things we can do. So I'm realizing that the further north we go, the less the smaller number of attendees we get. So I'm trying to figure out something that's within a reasonable driving distance of Lansing, where we could do something. So I'll start talking to people about this next week, and then maybe we can discuss this offline before the next meeting.
sounds perfect. Thank you very much, Frank. Thank you. Any open comments?
I guess I'll throw one in here. This will be officially my last meeting after a mere 21 years of this council and its former iterations. It's been a pleasure. And I think, in another 21 years, you guys should have this down pat. That's
I will add and just say, I walked into this a mere 18 years ago, and it was pretty clear that I had missed a lot at that point already. And James, I've relied on you all the way through for you and Dave Hamilton to help teach me what I needed to know about it. I'm still learning all the time, thanks to all of you. But this program wouldn't be in the place that it's at if it hadn't been for your involvement for 20 years. So thank you.
good or bad, right?
Either way. Depends on who you ask, which one's good or bad, but you've had a profound impact on it that I appreciate.
Yeah, James, thank you very, very much for all your service, for all your years at the state and all your years with MEC before that. And with all of the involvement that you've had with water use and a whole host of other environmental issues. So we really appreciate being able to work with you, and hopefully your retirement means you're going to be able to do some fun stuff.
That's the plan.
All right.
Excellent. Anybody else have any open comments?
My only comment is if you didn't sign in, to please sign in to help with the attendance record keeping portion of this meeting.
Thank you.
Yes, my comment, this is Frank Ketawagishik, and my comment is that that as time goes by, there's fewer and fewer of us that have been around in that 20-year area. And I've sort of, Brian and I've had very similar times here, and I really appreciate it. And James, I really appreciate all the things that you've done and the work to be working with you over these years. And I also, as I see this, I'm getting closer to that point where I may be retiring as well. Not tomorrow, but sometime soon. So thanks.
Sarah also says congratulations.
Thank you. All right, not hearing any other open comments, I would take a motion to adjourn. Thompson made that, Katie seconded it. Any opposed? All right, thank you. Appreciate it, and I'll see you in a couple of months or sooner in committee work.
Thanks, everyone.
I know.
All right.